Oh, okay. So this is like my favourite question.
Cool.
Partly because I've come from the two different agencies that came together to create Wavemaker. So I spent a long time at MEC, where I used to run the central planning group, which was their global strategy group. And then in 2009, I moved over to help start Maxus and ran the strategic products across Maxus globally. So being at Wavemaker, I see the best of two agencies coming together. And for me, that's really important. A lot of it, I think, is about spirit and energy and desire to create new things in the marketplace that we exist in at the moment. And I know that both, having worked at both Maxus and MEC, we have absolutely bags of that energy. What's lovely is watching it come together so nicely and watching how the two agencies are so complementary in the way that they think about the world, but also in terms of kind of culture and kind of desire to do things better. We talk about our own kind of internal way of being hugely collaborative with each other, and for us that's really important, and I see it in bags. The other thing that's great is that actually both agencies had slightly different ways of approaching the world, and what we've done is we've really reinvented everything. So we've taken the best of two things and then we've brought them together to create something new. And we've done it super fast. So a lot of what I'm talking about with our guys here this week is about stuff like the new tool set that we've just created, where we've taken the best of Group M, the best of Maxus, and the best of MEC, and then created a whole load of new bespoke tools that are specifically designed for the way that we're thinking about the world now. Yeah, that's right. So rapid growth planning is our operating system, and we've had kind of a bit of a luxury, I guess, by starting a new agency, and that we've been able to go back to basics and to look at what really matters in communications today. So we've been able to get rid of a lot of the legacy systems that we had and kind of start afresh. And really the kind of center point of that thinking is what we call rapid growth planning. And rapid growth planning is our operating system. Mm-hmm. And it's designed to and when I say operating system, I have this thing about planning processes that agencies traditionally have had, which is that very often the planning process feels slightly abstracted from the execution that people in the street see. And for me that's a big challenge, because there's no point doing great planning if it doesn't make an impact on the work. So when we've built rapid growth planning, we've really had an eye on how we bring those things together properly, and how everything has a really clear line of sight between the strategic starting point and the executional work that happens at the end. And that's why we call it an operating system, because it properly drives the way that we think as well as the way that we do. It enables us to bring all the different units of the agency together in a single coordinated piece. So we don't find that there are bits of the agency that are abstracted, or that we're selling bolt-on items that aren't necessarily relevant. It gives everything relevance and purpose. And we're finding that it's working incredibly well for the clients that are using it at the moment. Well, for me, collaboration is really important. And I think that in the world that we exist at the moment, we need to stop fighting with each other. And there's so much overlap, there's so much greyness. I think we're quite grown up about that. And I think certainly our view is that we're really happy to work together with whoever is best able to do a job. And we're not, we don't make ads. We do content, we do pretty amazing content when we do it. But our objective is to say, well, if we think about rapid growth planning, which is rooted around a deep understanding of the purchase journey, then that enables us to use all the data that we have as a media agency and as part of Group M. It enables us to use all that data and to look for opportunities where other agencies might best be able to interact with us. Because when we look at the pathway, we don't look at it just from a media perspective, we look at it holistically. In fact, we also look at it before a client gives us a brief. So our objective is to perhaps become more consultative in the way that we can work with clients, because we are much more neutral in our view of the way that communications as a whole should be engineered for the client. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's always been an implicit deal that consumers do with media. And for years, throughout history, the deal has been, we discount newspapers and you buy them for very low cost, but the deal is that you have to look at the ads.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the implicit deal. What's interesting is how that implicit deal seems to be breaking down at the moment. And I'm not sure why, to be honest, because there's so much amazing free stuff out there for people, more than ever before. You know, there's more free value out for consumers. And the implicit deal, of course, that we have is that it is a deal which is based in data. Stuff like the turning on ad blocking, kind of scares me and concerns me, because it just means that business model has to break down. What's going to be interesting is to see how business evolves and how new models evolve. And maybe part of it is just about educating consumers better as to how we can use data to improve their lives. Because my job, you know, when I think about my role, I have 3 masters in my job. And my first master are the agency that I work for, because they pay my salary and I hope that I input into them and make, you know, that other people's lives within the agency better and more interesting and the work better and so on and so forth. My second master are the clients that I work on, because the clients give me briefs that I get excited about, and also the clients pay the agency to pay me. My third master are the people in the street. Yeah, my third master is, you know, those guys walking down there. And I have a responsibility to make sure that their lives improve. Yeah, because actually, as a media person, as an advertising person, I have a tremendous amount of power. I have lots of ability to put messaging in front of people. And if that messaging is going to work really well, then I kind of want to put a smile on their faces. And I think that the challenge that we have at the moment is that a lot of the industry has forgotten about the third master, that we've become overly commercial, and that we're forgetting about the importance of people in the street and the importance of putting smiles on people's faces. And I feel very passionately that if we improve a lot of that thinking, then actually the data problem will be less precise, because people will see more value in what we're doing, and will become less irritating. Oh, okay. Well, for me, I think that the really big opportunity is about joined up thinking. I look at our industry, and we talked about the challenges yesterday. We talked about short-termism. We talked about the battle for engagement. We talked about disruptive business models. For me, the key thing that helps that we've lost over the last few years as we've become more and more specialist, which we've had to become, but as we've become more and more specialist, we have lost the art of joining things together. And for me, properly understanding how things can build one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, in a really compelling way, is kind of core to us to us being successful in the future. What I see at the moment is I see a massive emphasis on short-term sales driving communication. And I see that happening at the expense of traditional brand work. And I understand why that is, because of the environment that we live in and so on and so forth. And also because actually it's much easier for a CMO to keep their job if they can prove that they're making their sales figures every month. But I think we're likely to run into a problem in the nearish future where actually we start to see the value of brands reduce. Because if we look at, there's so many papers out there that say actually you can't do both. Yeah, that short-term is, the activities that design short-term sales very often doesn't build brand and actually may have a negative effect on it. So we need to get better. I'm not advocating put more money into brand, okay, because that money is hard to measure. But what I am advocating is finding ways of ensuring that short-termist work has a genuine effect on brand, and that brand driving work can genuinely drive short-term sales activity. For me, a lot of it's about measurement. And a lot of the challenge is that all the measurement, the really short, the short-term robust measures all sit in the short-term sales driving activity. So we need to get much, much better at proving that an investment into a brand building piece of activity drives a sale. We've spent a lot of time at Wavemaker over the last months developing methodology that allows us to prove that. So we can show that an investment in brand will have a massive impact in particular categories on your ability to retain people, your ability to stop people from wandering across the pathway as they go through it, and has a massive impact on people's streamlining the journey to sale. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I lost my... I could talk about it. I mean, for me, I'll give you a different type of answer. For me, there's a really scary, interesting thought, which is everything at the moment is hugely rational. So all the data, all the technology we're doing is hugely rational, and all the AI and everything is hugely rational. For me, the really interesting piece is when we start to build emotional AI. And for me, that kind of really changes the game, potentially. And it doesn't necessarily change the game from the way that we supply advertising and messages to people. It actually changes the way that people buy stuff. So it changes the demand thing. So let me give you an example, and it's kind of a crazy example, but I think it might one day come to fruition, or it's possible it is, and it's worth thinking about it as a thought experiment. So here's the thought. So basically, at the moment in America, there's a billionairess called Martina Rothblatt, and she's built a computer she's built a system called Bina 48, which models the brain of her partner, and it thinks emotionally about things. So I go, that's kind of interesting. If you can emotionally replicate the way that somebody thinks about something, and we all know that all purchases are emotional, then that kind of changes the way that you purchase stuff. So imagine, we all know about the Internet of Things and everything being plugged in, and that's kind of happening. But imagine that you could buy a washing machine, and you could decide that you don't really like buying washing powder. So what you could then do is you could then program your washing machine to think about washing powder the same way that you do. So it would replicate the way that you emotionally think about washing powder. And then what would happen is on a Monday morning, the computer from one of the big corporates like Unilever or P&G might call your washing machine, and their computer will say, "Hey, Nick's washing machine, how are you feeling today?" And my washing machine will say, "Oh, I've had a terrible weekend washing socks." And then the Unilever or the P&G computer will say, "Well, hey, don't worry, because Nick's out buying cashmere jumpers and some lavender aftershave. So I'm going to do a deal for you on lavender cashmere wash. And if you buy it in bulk, you'll get it really cheap." And my washing machine goes, "Fantastic," and buys it. And then all of a sudden, that whole demand piece is done by computers. So I no longer have to think about laundry. I kind of already do it because I use online shopping, and I just buy the same thing again every time. So I have like 50 cucumbers in the fridge. But for me, that's kind of really interesting, that you could argue that if that happens, that some lower level purchases or some purchases which people think are less considered will start to be automated. And that will mean that we see large amounts of the industry potentially become about algorithms talking to algorithms, emotional algorithms talking to emotional algorithms. And that's kind of interesting.
Not only interesting, it's kind of like Black Mirror meets anti-Black Mirror.
Yeah, in a kind of way. I mean, I hope it means that we can all go on holiday more.
Yeah.
I love meeting people. So, what I loved about this festival was its informality. The fact that actually it just felt good to talk to anyone. And that's kind of rare, actually, very often at these kind of things. You feel that everyone's kind of got their little tribes and stuff. But at this one, it was lovely just wandering around, talking to people, everyone really keen to have a conversation, everyone with something quite interesting to say. And so for me, that's the one thing that really stuck out is it felt like a really informal event where everybody had a kind of similar objective, which was to do better work. And also, I love the fact that there are all the little tech companies, everything out there. So I've kind of learned quite a lot. So I kind of so for me, that was it. Lovely people with passion, all chatting together. Awesome.